Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello and a warm welcome to Reflections, the show from Torch Trust that talks about faith and disability in today's world. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and I'm delighted to be with you for the next half an hour. Today we're going to hear from Vicki Bryson, the new Church Partnership Coordinator at Torch. We're also going to hear from Marie McCarroll, who attended the Torch Northern Ireland Convention a few months ago. Sight Loss Friendly Church is an important Torch initiative. Its aim is to help churches across the UK to become as welcoming and inclusive as possible to blind and partially sighted people. Vicki Bryson recently started working as Church Partnership Coordinator, and Lynn Davies caught up with her to ask, amongst other things, what she thought were the main barriers to inclusion in the church.
So, Vicki, you are the new Church Partnership Coordinator, which is a very fancy title, but it's sort of my previous job, isn't it? Almost. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you get into Torch?
My name's Vicki. I am an ordained priest in the Church of England. So I've been involved in Church of England churches for quite a while. And my passion has always been that church should be for everyone, for no one should feel left out when they walk into a church building. God wants all his people to come together in worship. And as a leader, my job is to make sure that I do everything I can to include everyone in that, to use everyone's gifts, everyone's skills. And so when I moved to Market Harborough, we heard about this amazing organisation called Torch. I'm married to Phil. He's also a priest and he's visually impaired. And so people said to him, oh, there's this great organisation called Torch. Have you heard of them? We honestly had to say, well, we hadn't before we moved here, but as soon as we did, we were so excited that Torch existed, that there were people supporting and providing resources for those who are blind and visually impaired. And we both felt that at some point we would love Torch to be part of our journey. We didn't quite know 2 years ago how that would happen. And over the summer, a few things happened in our family life, and we worked out that actually it would make sense if Phil was vicar full-time and I looked for something else. And this job came up at Torch, and God just kept prompting me. And I said, okay, Lord, well, I would love to do it. Let's see. And I applied and here I am.
That's amazing, because Phil was writing a sermon for Sight Loss Sunday last year, and I had no idea really who he was, apart from the fact that he was a vicar who lived in Market Harborough. And I just thought that, you know, it would be good to get someone who lives in Market Harborough who's visually impaired themselves. Little did I know that I was going to be working with you, his wife, a couple of months later.
Yeah.
So you moved to Market Harborough not really with any Torch in mind, like it was a complete coincidence almost, or like it wasn't planned that you were going to live in Market Harborough and Torch was there. That just sort of was a thing that you discovered when you came. Is that right?
Yes, so we were in Bedford before. I was running a church. Phil was working for St Albans Diocese, and we felt called to St Dionysius in Market Harborough, our church. And it was on arrival, we met Sheila Armstrong. She came to our licensing service and said, hey, let me talk to you about Torch. So that was the first that we'd heard of Torch. And yeah.
So as a vicar then, what is your experience with diversity and inclusion within the church, and has that changed since you became ordained?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think a lot of us as church leaders really want to be inclusive. We really want to get things right. But we're very aware that we don't always get things right. And even when we think we've done something that could work, we're not always sure, is it the right thing, is it not? I would love the church to be more inclusive. I would love more people to hear about Torch and be able to have those resources. So for us as a church, because of Phil's visual impairment, we were able to say, well, we will put in place large prints, we'll put in place different ways of using a screen, but we only did that because of our personal experience. So having an organisation like Torch that can give guidelines and say, hey, actually, this is the size a large print should be, this is what kind of font you should be using, is so helpful. So I think the church really does try. The church has a heart to be inclusive, but all advice welcome would be my my conclusion.
What do you think are the barriers to being as inclusive as possible for
Mm.
churches?
Yeah. I think firstly, it is about knowing what to do, and knowing how to include people and who to include. I think we're getting better with some things. So churches are getting a much better understanding of ramps for people in wheelchairs and with mobility issues. Hearing loops are becoming more common. So there are some things that we know we should do. I would love to see the church become more inclusive for those with neurodiversity, for example, and other disabilities that we may not realise that the barriers are there. So I think one of the things is actually knowing there's a barrier, because when you know there's a barrier, you can have more of a chance of fixing it. But I think sometimes we don't see the barriers that are there until someone comes in and says, hey, I want to join your church, but this isn't working for me. And that can be the start of a journey, hopefully, to make a church more inclusive as we meet people and they give us their advice and wisdom.
Yeah, so almost like, would you say it's a bit like a sort of pre-anticipatory thing where you think that these things might come up, so we will do what we can, but ultimately it's down to people to approach you who wants to join a church.
Yeah. And I think also, like most organizations, money is a factor as well. So it's a case of, do you buy the large print book, even if you don't have anyone who has a visual impairment who is blind, or do you wait till they get there and buy it to keep the resources? So I think that's another factor for us, is how many things do you invest in? So yeah.
Like, one thing that has come up for me several times when I was doing my previous job were the amount of blind and visually impaired people who got in touch and saying that they didn't attend church because they didn't feel welcome and they hadn't managed to find somewhere where they felt they would be seen as a whole, full human being. Do you have any thoughts around that? And how would you want to work in this role to break down barriers between people and church?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my previous role, as well as being a parish priest, I was a vocations advisor. So I was working with people who felt a call to leadership. And one of the things that I am really passionate about is people who have disabilities being involved in leadership. Because when you're part of a church, we all have a role. It's not for me that you rock up at church and you're passive and then you leave again. Actually, we're the body of Christ. We all work together. And one of the things that particularly seeing Phil in post, I'm so passionate about, is having more people who are disabled, particularly people who are blind and visually impaired, as church leaders in leadership roles. So actually, for me, it's about talking to a person and saying, well, what are your gifts? What are your skills? How do you want to get involved? Don't worry about what barriers you see. Actually, who are you? Who's God made you? What gifts has God made you? And how can we use those together? And actually, a lot of modelling of having people of all in all kinds of roles, I think, is really important. And also just having that welcome person at the door. I think it's so important to have someone at the door who can say, actually, come and meet people. Let me introduce you to people in a way that will help you, and yeah, get you included in being part of the family. Because for me, church is family. It's not just something you go to on a Sunday. It's joining a family. It's being part of people who you share life with, really.
So you're quite new in your role now. I appreciate you've only been with us for just over a week at the time of this recording. But have you got any thoughts of one or two things that you're hoping to achieve maybe in your first year in post, within your first year?
Hmm. I think Torch has so many amazing things to offer. I think Sight Loss Friendly Church is incredible. And my first priority is really speaking to more churches so they know about Torch. So really a promotion of what Torch is, what Torch stands for, and what Torch can offer. So my first job really is getting to know the sight loss friendly churches we already have, and then telling other people about the benefits of sight loss friendly church and how they can join and become part of the family.
Vicky, I'm so excited to have you in this new role, and I think you are a perfect fit for it. And I can't wait to see how Sight Loss Friendly Church and you are going to develop in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Lynn.
If you'd like to find out more about Sight Loss Friendly Church and how they can help, do go to www.torchtrust.org and click on Sight Loss Friendly Church. Alternatively, you can email slfc@torchtrust.org or call Client Services. In November 2024, Torch held a convention in Northern Ireland. Chair of Trustees Tony Brown was there to give a talk, and Torch CEO Sarah Dawkins also attended to talk about the various Torch services. Someone who attended the convention is Marie McCarroll. She spoke to Lynn Davies about her experience of the convention.
So, Marie, you attended the Torch convention in Northern Ireland. Had you ever heard of Torch before?
No, I had never heard of Torch before. But I heard it before, and I went to that convention. I'd heard about it. But I didn't know about Torch until my own eyesight went. And then when my eyesight got so bad I couldn't see very well and all that kind of thing, I had to give up preaching and that. A good friend of mine, she knew about Torch, and she told this other friend, and two of the Torch people from Banbridge, a Torch meeting, they came down to see me. And they said they'd heard that my eyesight had got bad, and they brought me a lovely little, a sort of a wireless with a memory stick that I could put in for daily readings. And that was my introduction to Torch. And then, of course, I did speak at a few of their meetings a few times after that. When I did say speak, I give my full testimony at one, and then my friend and I, she does the preaching, and I just give a wee story.
So is that your personal stories that you do then, or is it something related to the Bible?
Because I've been a missionary for many, many years, I pick out a wee text and then say of what the Lord, how that worked out in my life, sort of thing. And people seem to enjoy that.
So back to the meeting then. How did you hear about that?
Well, first of all, after we had done a lot of preaching, while I was at the last meeting that we spoke at, then Colin said, now we're having this meeting, this convention meeting, and the next time, and would you not like to come? Just as to sit down with everybody else and enjoy it. So I said, well, that'd be great. So because they'd been so good to me, I thought, well, I'll go. And so we went. When I went in, I enjoyed it very, very much.
So what happened then? Were there any speeches or any speakers that you found inspiring?
Well, don't ask me now to remember names, for that I'm no good at. But there was an Englishman, I can tell you that, and he spoke on prayer. A real challenging word. Even the people were talking about it later, and I mean, they made comments to me about it, and I said it was one of the best messages I've heard in a long time. And then there was another lady who told more about what Torch does and where the holidays that they have and outings that they have and meetings that they would have and different, what Torch does. And that filled me in a wee bit more about what Torch is all about.
What is it that you found especially inspiring? What was do you have sort of any takeaways from that meeting? Anything that you want to do going forward? Was there anything about maybe the prayers that sparked some joy for you, or even using Torch more?
Yes, well, I do appreciate what they're doing because, as I say, they give me one of those little memory sticks and a little wireless, and I've been greatly blessed listening to Selwyn Hughes on prayer, and he was on prayer at the time, and that was a real blessing to me. And then it led on to revival, and it got me now reading books on revival. Checking up to see was there anything that they had said that I sort of missed out on, and it got me reading more books on revival, and on prayer.
What would you say to people who might want to attend torch meetings in the future? So this could be just either regular torch meetings where they live, or maybe a bigger meeting if we do have conventions around the UK. What would you say to them?
Oh no, I would encourage them to go if they could. I would say if you're near it and you can get to it, and please you do go, because you will be challenged, you will be blessed. I know that, and even their time of singing is inspiring. Even the time of singing the hymns and the choruses and all together, and there's that togetherness. And even at the table, sitting around having a sandwich or whatever, at the convention did a sort of sit-down meal. Well, it was marvelous, because you were meeting people, actually sitting, chatting with people that you didn't get maybe at an ordinary meeting. Meetings that I would have taken you while you were in and out again. Whereas at the torch meeting, they seem to sit around and chat to one another, and there seems to be a bond. I thought that was good. So I would tell people that, no, you'll make friends. If you haven't got a friend, you'll make friends there, and it will be something for them to look forward to.
I'm sad to say that we're out of time for today, but we will be back next week with more interviews and reflections. And don't forget, if you're blind or partially sighted and would like to learn more about any of the services provided by Torch, including ordering the NIV Bible, our Torch Together holidays, our accessible books and resources, or our groups, our client services team would be very happy to speak to you. The number to call for information and for song requests is 01858 438 260. That's 01858 438 260, or you can email info@torchtrust.org. You can also find us on social media. Just search for Torch Trust on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Well, I'm sorry to say that we are out of time now. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reflections, and until next week, from me, Marilyn, and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.